My coworker didn't invite me to his wedding, and it was a real bummer that I'm a 30-year-old guy and have been at my company for 7 years, with 5 of those being on my current team. We're a group of 15, and I'd say we're pretty tight-knit. That I've got a coworker, Bob, who's 33 and joined the team around the same time as me. So, during one of our Zoom meetings back in the day, he suddenly lets everyone know he's engaged. It's now January, and Bob says his wedding is set for September at this really gorgeous winery. About 5 months ago, the invites started going out to everyone on the team, except for me. I waited a few weeks, but nothing came, so I went to Bob and asked about my invite. He gave me a serious look and said I wasn't invited because of a spacing issue. He said he tried to fix it, but it didn't work out, and he hoped I didn't take it personally. He also said I'd be sure to get wedding favors and a piece of cake, and he asked me to keep it to myself and not make a big deal out of it. I honestly didn't know what to say, so I just said okay and walked away. I won't lie, I was upset. I hate feeling left out, especially when everyone else on the team was invited but me. I really like weddings. They were usually a lot of fun, but I didn't say anything to anyone. I wasn't happy, though. The wedding was 3 weeks ago, and it went really well. Everyone on my team had a great time and said it was beautiful. The food and party were great, too, and apparently, everyone got a dozen fresh apple cider donuts to take home. I never did get the cake or the wedding favors. By the way, at work the following Monday, my team member Sherry told me that everyone was confused as to where I was. So, Bob said I was sick and couldn't make it, and I was like, what the heck? I was pretty confused, to be honest, and then I was pretty annoyed that I was like, I wasn't invited, and left it at that. She looked shocked and asked me to confirm, and I was like, yeah, I wasn't invited. Well, Sherry told someone, because about 5 people asked me if I wasn't invited, and I was like, yeah, it's true. Today was Bob's first day back from his honeymoon, and it seems he got wind of the situation. He came up to me in the break room, upset that I'd mentioned it to Sher, and said it wasn't a big deal. I told him I was bummed about missing the wedding, and he said, how would you like to be left out of something everyone else is going to? We went back and forth for a bit before Bob walked away. I was pretty upset, and my project manager came to see if I was okay because she'd heard about me not being invited. I didn't want this to blow up, so I said yes. But some of my colleagues said that Bob should have invited me, and that it was unfair. I realized it was his wedding day, and he's allowed to invite whomever he wants, but I'm allowed to be upset that I wasn't invited. Am I a jerk for telling people I wasn't invited to the wedding and being upset about it? More info. All my team got +1s, and 12 out of 15 people on my team. Are there any older folks here who are married or in a relationship besides Bob and me? There's this 26-year-old woman who was invited but decided to go alone. And now I'm starting to think maybe my wife wasn't too keen on me being there. But I can't figure out why. We met at a work Christmas party. And for some reason, we ended up talking about Super Mario Maker and Breath of the Wild for like 15 minutes. I don't think she's interested in me, you know? She did add me online to download some of my stuff, and there are levels for SMM. Other than that, I haven't seen or heard from her in 3 years, but maybe she just likes my level of construction, lol. Also, for those of you wondering, I'm just as pasty white as they are and have nothing that makes me out of the ordinary. There are other people on my team who are poach and were invited, as well as a lot at the wedding from what I've seen in pictures. Now, I wouldn't say I'm classically attractive, but I'm not Jimmy G. Apollo, but I'm tall, 6'4", and I lift, so I have a lean figure. To answer everyone's question, I do well in the dating department. I'm straight, if I can say that without making me sound like a total self-absorbed douche. Bob isn't a bad-looking guy at all. He's shorter than me, but he's still tall and has an excellent conversation that I can't imagine he'd be threatened by me. I don't want to make a huge deal out of this because we work from home 3 days a week, so I don't have to see him that often if I don't want to. I've never had a cross word with Bob other than this, but I'll definitely keep an eye on how Bob is managing the narrative and be sure to report it to my project manager if anything gets out of hand. I'm wondering if I'm a jerk for not going to a wedding. Thanks for the replies and the wedding invites. Here's the latest. Bob and I were in the office today, and he asked to talk. He said we could clear the air over some beers with his wife after work. I said okay. I met Bob and his wife, Pam, at a bar after work. They apologized for not inviting me and making me feel excluded. Bob apologized, and they said they were so caught up in their lies and tantrums that they didn't invite me to the wedding because they didn't want single guys there. They went to a big wedding back in 2019, and it was ruined when a bunch of drunk single guys started hitting on the women there. A few of the boyfriends and husbands got pissed, and it turned into a big fight. People were arrested, and it completely ruined the wedding. I couldn't believe it, but they showed me a couple of Facebook videos of them at a wedding, and it looked like a royal rumble was going on. I even saw a few Facebook statuses that confirmed their story. Pam said she was sort of traumatized by this and swore there'd be no single guys at her wedding, but the wedding came and Pam stuck to her guns. Only family couples, single women, or trusted single men were invited. Pam said there were only about 10 single guys there, and they were all family members or groomsmen. She said the party turned, which was great since women don't have to worry about being hit on. Pam said it wasn't personal and that she was sorry I wasn't invited, but she'd invite me next time. I asked if she and Bob didn't trust me enough to control myself, and she said that Bob vouched hard for me, but she was sticking to her guns. The compromise was that she'd have to explain it if anyone asked, and that Bob got to choose the honeymoon destination, which was interesting. She said she had a sister around my age and she thought I was her type, but she wanted to keep her away from me. I was a little offended, but she says it's for my own good. Her sister is a bit of a SLT, her words, not mine, and she didn't want her to get her hooks in me again. Bob said he should have handled it better and he wanted to be honest, but it wouldn't have made much of a difference. He said he hoped I wouldn't mind as much and that he figured I wouldn't want to go to a wedding as a single guy anyway. That I told them I was kind of hurt, and they thought I would act like a creep at their wedding. Pam assured me that she thought I was a nice, smart, funny guy, but she just wanted to make sure their wedding went off without a hitch. They promised to make it up to me, but I told them it wasn't necessary. Pam insisted on it, saying he hoped I wouldn't be too bothered by it. I figured I wouldn't want to go to a wedding as a single guy anyway. I told them I was kind of hurt. They thought I would act like a creep at their wedding. Pam assured me that she thought I was a nice, smart, funny guy, but she just wanted to make sure their wedding went off without a hitch. They promised to make it up to me, but I told them it wasn't necessary. Pam insisted on it and said I had to know how sorry she was. So, we made plans to have dinner at their expense at a very nice restaurant in the city this weekend. So, in the end, I guess it wasn't anything I did, but I still feel kind of insulted. But I guess I get a free dinner out of it, I shrugged. Fair skin edit. There are a lot of comments here suggesting that I'm being naive, a doormat, and letting them off easy for basically calling me a creep. I won't deny I shouldn't, but I feel kind of insulted. I guess I get a free dinner out of it, though. Fair skin edit. There are a lot of comments here suggesting that I'm being naive and a doormat, and that I'm letting them off easy for basically calling them a creep. I won't lie. I think you all might be right that I do believe in taking the high road on most occasions, but I don't think this should be one of those times. I don't think wanting to see the best in people makes you naive. I had a call with my project manager an hour ago and explained the whole situation. She told me to go to HR and make a complaint, since it could lead to a hostile work environment. I have a meeting with. I think you're probably right that I usually try to see the best in people, but I don't think this is one of those times. I don't think wanting to see the best in people makes you naive. I had a call with my project manager an hour ago and explained the whole situation. She told me to go to HR and make a complaint, since it could lead to a hostile work environment. I have a meeting with him on Monday. I don't really want to make a formal complaint, just have it on file in case anything happens. To be honest, I don't think it will, but I've been wrong plenty of times before. So, I'll take the advice here that I'm not going to dinner with Bob and Pam, but I'll insist on a public apology that doesn't imply that I'm a creep. I'm also insisting on some fresh apple C. I don't really want to make a formal complaint, but I'm just keeping it on file in case anything comes up. To be honest, I don't think it will, but I've been wrong plenty of times before. So, for the advice, here's what I'm doing. I'm not going to dinner with Bob and Pam, but I'll need a public apology that doesn't make it seem like I'm a creep. I'm also insisting on some fresh apple cider donuts, not the store-bought kind. Thanks for making me see the truth. Reddit. I'm disappointed, but I'm turning down some Wagyu steak, so you all owe me one. Update and more context. Before I get to the update, there are a few things I'd like to clarify and put in context. I got a few posts and DMs asking why I felt entitled to be invited. I want to make it clear that I don't feel entitled to anything. Yes, I like donuts, not store-bought, but fresh. Thanks for making me see the truth, Reddit. I'm disappointed, but I'm turning down some Wagyu steak, so you all owe me one. Update and more context. Before I get to the update, there are a few things I'd like to clarify and put in context. I got a few posts and DMs asking why I felt entitled to be invited. I want to make it clear that I don't feel entitled to anything. I really wanted to be invited, but if they had been honest with me from the beginning, I wouldn't have minded as much. They were allowed to do what they wanted on their wedding day, and that's cool. My problem was that the suburb refuge used to mask their choice. I've never talked to Bob about women. We didn't have that kind of relationship, and none of the men on the team do either. I think the women do it among themselves, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm choosing to believe Pam. When it came to men, Pam had to turn away some of her single male friends, and Bob had a ton of guy friends who wanted to go but were turned away. Pam and some of her friends had very bad experiences with guys hitting on them at clubs, and Pam wanted to ensure their safety. So, she came up with the idea to have guys-only clubs, and the Royal Rumble happened at one of her friends' weddings. The friend and her husband were pretty upset, and their wedding was a total disaster. As for me, I'll take credit for the invite, but it was a last-minute thing. Pam didn't know me at all outside of my Super Mario Maker level design, which she really admired. Bob really fought hard for me, but Pam wasn't so sure. Then she remembered her sister, according to Pam. Although she loves her sister to death, her sister is a huge SLT who flirts with every guy. Apparently, I'm dangerously her type, and she would have been all over me. Bob said it would look horrible if 7,030 on me being invited. The bottom line is that Pam didn't know me at all, other than my awesome Super Mario Maker level design. Bob really fought hard for me, but Pam was too unsure, and then she remembered her sister. According to Pam, although she loves her sister to death, her sister is a huge SLT who flirts with every guy. Apparently, I'm dangerously her type, and she would have been all over me. Bob said it would look bad if I wasn't invited, so Pam came up with the idea of taking the heat for it. He was just hoping that I wouldn't mind not going, but I'm choosing to believe Bob about feeling horrible about not inviting me. He seemed really upset about it, either because he's a damn good actor or because he's telling the truth. He said the way he lost it was terrible. There was no way to do it without losing it. It was a bit weird, to be honest. He panicked and couldn't think of anything better. Getting mad at me for not going along with it wasn't really about me, but more about him being mad at Pam for putting him in that situation. He promised to make a full apology in front of the team when we're all together in the office again in a few weeks. Pam said she felt terrible about me and the other guys she had to exclude, but she'd do it again to ensure safety. Of the women around her, she was the most insistent on making it up to me. She said we should be friends and offered to have me over for dinner, which would be followed by some wine and a round of Mario Kart. I turned that down. Then, the expensive restaurant solution was offered, and I accepted because it seemed like a fair compromise at the time. They didn't even have to apologize, but they were offering me dinner, so I took it. In hindsight, I shouldn't have. But at that point, I just wanted to get out of there and go home. After reading the comments calling me a doormat, I decided not to accept their dinner offer. I called Bob on his work phone to explain my change of heart. He was disappointed but understood my reason for changing my mind. I paired some of the talking points, and he said he understood. He said he wouldn't make a big deal out of it and that we could just move on. I thanked him for being cool about it, and he hung up. I thought that was it, but then Bob called me back 5 minutes later. I groaned and picked up, and it was Pam on the other side. She didn't come at me angrily, but she did sound upset. She wanted to know why I didn't want to come anymore. I explained what I told Bob about how they basically insisted I was a creep. I told her I didn't want to invalidate her experiences, but I didn't have to accept being called a sexual predator. She said I'm a potential sexual predator, but she didn't mean it like that. She thinks I'm a good person, but she couldn't risk it for her wedding. She was practically begging me to meet her in person to clear the air. She kept saying that we could be friends if I just give her a chance to explain, but I said no thanks and that I had to go. I'm sorry that she went through what she went through, though that I ended up calling her and saying, "Hey, by the way, I didn't even get those donuts," and then hung up. It's been pretty quiet since then, but Bob's back in the office on Monday, and I'm worried Pam might do something drastic. I hope this is over, but I'm worried it might not be. I'll let you know if anything happens. Here's the latest on Bob's drunken confession. Hey everyone, as I mentioned in my last update, I reached out to Bob and explained that I wouldn't be taking him. I also asked Pam about their weekend dinner plans, and she was disappointed but agreed with me. A few minutes later, she called me back and tried really hard to keep the plans. I said no and left it at that, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't, and now this drama continues. I went in 2 hours early on Monday so I could avoid a chat with Bob after work. Surprisingly, Bob came in an hour early, lining him up to potentially leave with me. Bob looked exhausted, and I don't know what to think. I don't mean tired. I mean mentally. I've seen Bob tired. We've worked many late nights on projects together. I've seen him hungover, but this was something else that I can't even describe it. He looked totally exhausted. He shot me a sideways look, and I returned the gesture. We got to work, and I kept my meeting with HR. Our HR rep is a wonderful lady named Sally. I told her the whole story, and she said that in her 15 years in HR, she's never heard a more stupid story. We shared a good laugh, and she told me that it would be logged, just in case Bob or Pam did anything crazy. She said she thinks Bob is harmless, but to keep my eyes peeled. Then we got to work, and I mentioned the meeting with HR. Our HR rep is this awesome lady named Sally, and I told her the whole story. She said that in her 15 years in HR, she's never heard a more stupid story. We shared a good laugh, and she told me that it would be logged, just in case Bob or Pam did anything crazy. She said she thinks Bob is harmless, but to keep my eyes peeled. The rest of the day was pretty chill, and the only interesting thing that happened was that I saw Bob's face buried in his hands for a good minute or so. With 2 hours to go, I went to the break room for some water and Bob followed me in. I'm not gonna lie, the story we shared was pretty ridiculous, but we had a good laugh about it. She told me that it would be logged, just in case Bob or Pam did anything crazy. She said Bob's harmless, but to keep my eyes peeled. The rest of the day was pretty uneventful, but the most interesting thing that happened was seeing Bob buried in his hands for a solid minute. With 2 hours left, I went to the break room for water. Bob followed me in and came up to me cautiously, so I gave him a surprised look, and he just threw up his hands like he wasn't even there. He said he knows I'm the last person he wants to talk to right now, but he needs to talk to me. I said, okay, but let's move over to where the security camera was. Paraphrasing here, but he said, look, I won't ever speak to you again if you don't want me to, but let me buy you a drink and explain. I went in and he was a bit nervous. I looked at him, surprised, and he just put up his hands like he wasn't doing anything wrong. He said he knows I'm not the person he wants to talk to right now, but he needs to talk to me. I said, okay, but let's move over to where the security camera was. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, look, I won't talk to you again if you don't want me to, but let me buy you a drink and explain everything. All of the things Pam didn't tell you when we met the other day. Bob sounded desperate, something I'd never seen from him before. Then he hit me with the money quote. Look, man, I could really use a friend right now, and I've always considered you a friend. Well, sorry to disappoint everyone here, but I'm a big gullible softy. I agreed to talk with him, but I told him that there would be absolutely no more meetings on this situation. After that, he agreed and said, hey, so Pam didn't tell you everything when we met the other day. Bob sounded desperate, which I've never seen from him before. Then he hit me with the money quote. Look, man, I could really use a friend right now, and I've always considered you a friend. Well, sorry to disappoint everyone here, but I'm a big gullible softy. I agreed to talk with him, but I told him that there would be absolutely no more meetings on this situation. He agreed and said he'd meet me after work, so we walked to our usual bar, the same place I'd met him and Pam the first time. That I thought Pam might be there, but she wasn't. Still, I kept an eye out for her. Once we sat down, Bob apologized again, and it sounded even more genuine this time. That I told him he didn't need to keep apologizing. I understood the first time, but he said he had to apologize because there's more to the story. We met up after work at our usual bar, the same place I'd met him and Pam the first time. That I thought Pam might be there, but she wasn't. Still, I kept an eye out for her. When we sat down, Bob apologized again, and it sounded even more genuine this time. I told him he didn't need to keep apologizing. I understood that he said there was more to the story about the wedding. Bob explained that he'd fought with Pam a lot to get her to give up the single men's exclusion, but she was dead set on it. That they'd argued for months, and lots of people had offered different solutions. Bob suggested a smaller wedding with only immediate family and friends, but Pam shot that down. She always dreamed of a big wedding with lots of people, and a small wedding just didn't fit her dream. Her parents said, why not hire a security guard? Pam said that she didn't want any part of that. So about the wedding, Bob said he fought with Pam a lot to get her to change her mind about the single men's exclusion, but she was dead set on it. They argued for months, and a lot of people offered different solutions. Bob suggested a smaller wedding with only immediate family and friends, but Pam shot that down. She always dreamed of a big wedding with lots of people, and a small wedding didn't fit her dream. Her parents said, why not hire a security guard? Pam said that she wanted the possibility eliminated completely. She said that a few single men could stand to not be invited to a party for once in their lives. Bob said he had a lot of friends who wanted to come, and they'd be hurt if they weren't invited. Pam said she was making sacrifices too, and a lot of her guy friends wanted to come. Bob finally agreed, but said that if they excluded anyone, he didn't want to be part of that decision. Pam said she was cool with taking the heat if it came to that, but she didn't think people would go nuts over it. She also let Bob pick their honeymoon spot, since he was making a big sacrifice. They went to the French Riviera, and if anyone's curious, Bob said the wedding reception and party were amazing. He said that so many women there were drunk off their ass and falling over themselves. Apparently, they did feel safe, but a drunk vocal minority was complaining about the lack of hot guys to dance. Bob even laughed because one of them was going around calling it a lesbian wedding since there were only women there. And some women were absolutely hitting on the handful of single guys there, but Pam didn't mind that as much. Bob said he wasn't rubbing it in, he was just setting up a point. After the honeymoon, they came home to what Bob described as a PR firestorm. Apparently, Pam had lied to her guy friends about why they weren't invited. One of her close friends had found out and spread the news. Bob thought it was funny, and so did the rest of the guys. They decided to go on a fishing trip as a screw you to Bob and Pam, and they even donated $1 to add insult to injury. After the wedding, Pam got a ton of angry calls and messages from her friends. They were furious that she had lied to them about why they weren't invited. Pam explained her position multiple times, but her friends just wouldn't listen. She has lost many friends over this. One guy even said, "If you think that I'm a rapist, then why are we even friends?" Pam's been crying for days, and her work life's a total mess. She might even have to quit. Friends finally spilled the real reason they weren't invited, and they were livid. They thought Pam was basically calling them sexual predators. Pam explained her position to her friends over and over, but they wouldn't listen. She's lost a lot of friends because of this. One guy even said, "If you think I'm a rapist, then why are we even friends?" Pam's been crying for days, and her job's a total mess. She might even have to quit. By this point, Bob's had a few drinks and he's pretty tipsy, so he starts to lose it a bit more. He says her decision cost him friends. So many of his friends were furious to learn they were excluded, and they wanted to know why. On the day of the wedding, about 6 of his closest friends who were excluded decided to go on a fishing trip as a screw you to Bob and Pam. The cherry on top of the petty cake. They decided to donate $500 and some items to a local woman's shelter. Bob was devastated, and none of those guys are answering his calls or messages. Even their families are upset with them over the exclusion. Pam's parents are publicly supportive, but they're chastising her behind the scenes. She doesn't have anyone but her bridesmaids and about 3 other friends who believe in her cause. Bob said at one point that Pam was hysterical and screaming, "Why can't anyone just understand my point of view? I'm just trying to make everyone happy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but there was more to this crazy story. At this point, we were about an hour in, and Bob was nice and tipsy, so I pressed for more information. Bob said that at first, Pam was sticking to her guns. She thought the exclusion was a good idea. But now she's having second thoughts. She said most people understood where she was coming from, but that it was too heavy-handed and even a little sexist. Bob and Pam have had multiple blow-ups, and I was shocked. But Bob explained that there was more to the story. He said that at first Pam was on the same page as him about the exclusion, but she was starting to have second thoughts. He said that most people understood where she was coming from, but that it was too heavy-handed and even a little sexist. Bob and Pam have had multiple blow-ups over this whole situation, and they're not in a good place right now. He said that instead of feeling excited about his new wife and basking in the glow of being married, he's harboring a ton of resentment towards her because she's cost him a lot of his friends and ruined their lives over a stupid party. As for me, apparently Pam really likes me. One of her biggest regrets about this entire situation is not getting to know me better before the wedding. He said that Pam about this whole situation. Apparently, Bob and his new wife have been having some issues, and he's feeling pretty resentful towards her because she's cost him a lot of friends and ruined their lives over some silly party. Apparently, Pam really likes me. She said that one of her biggest regrets about the whole situation is not getting to know me better before the wedding. She thinks I'm one of the coolest people she's ever met. I asked Bob how she'd come to that conclusion after just 15 minutes of conversation, and he laughed and said, "I don't know, man. She probably has a crush on you or something." I laughed, but that made the situation a little weird. As for Pam's sister, she's a SLT, but not in the way you might think. Bob explained that Pam's sister Beth is, by all accounts, a very smart, successful, respectful woman. So, she's into sex, right? Well, Bob said that Beth's really into the kink scene and stuff like ethical non-monogamy. She's always telling us about her adventures, and it's gotten us into the lifestyle too. I was kind of surprised. So I asked him to explain, and he said she's the one who got us into it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, how often do you hear about your coworker being into BDSM? But hey, no kink shaming here. For me, it turns out that Beth isn't some soul-sucking home record. She's just a regular woman who loves sex. Bob said that Pam was scared that we would hit it off because we share many of the same interests and have similar personality types. Bob says Pam wasn't lying about that, nor that I was exactly her type. She likes tall guys, and from what I've heard, she'd have been all over me if she found out So, it turns out that Beth isn't some soul-sucking home wrecker. She's just a regular woman who loves sex. Bob says Pam was scared that we would hit it off. We share a lot of the same interests and have similar personalities. Bob said Pam wasn't lying about that, and that I was exactly her type. She likes tall guys, and from what I've heard, she'd have been all over me if she found out I was single. Well, now I was curious, so I asked Bob if he had a picture. He pulled up her Instagram, and I must say, she was damn gorgeous. She looked like Pam's twin, only a bit thicker. I have to admit, I was pretty annoyed with Pam all over again. LOL. Bob said that Pam has always been a bit jealous of Beth, but I don't know why. Pam is gorgeous herself and looks just like Beth. Bob said that as a joke to Pam. He said he'd give her my Instagram so we could DM each other and put in a good word for me. That I thanked him profusely. LOL. That he said Pam was desperate to make amends with me because I made a big impression on her and she thinks we'd be really good friends if we hung out, but she's just grasping at straws at this point. She's lost all her friends and wanted to make another one. He said he'd rein Pam in so she wouldn't bother me anymore. By this point, Bob's more than tipsy. He says he has doubts about the marriage because the wedding process and aftermath have been a nightmare. He thinks it'd be shallow to divorce her over this. But his life has been ruined by her choices. I was shocked. And he said, "Don't tell Pam, please. I swore I wouldn't tell her anything." Bob paid for our drinks and he said he'd hired Pam to stop bothering me, and that he's having doubts about the marriage because the wedding and aftermath have been awful. He thinks it'd be shallow to divorce her over this. But her choices have ruined his life. I was shocked. And he said, "Don't tell Pam, please. I swore I wouldn't tell her anything." Bob paid for our drinks and he was going to take public transportation home, but I told him he needs an Uber. He fought me on that, but I insisted and he agreed to take one. I put him in the Uber and sent him on his way. An hour later, I got a text from Pam. She thanked me for taking care of her husband and said I'm a good person. I didn't respond. And that brings us to now. I hope this is mostly the end of it. But it seems like Pam might be desperate. I'm taking public transportation home, but I insisted that Bob get an Uber. He fought me on it, but I convinced him and he agreed to take one. I put him in the Uber and sent him on his way. An hour later, Pam texted me from his work phone. She thanked me for taking care of her husband and said I'm a good person. I didn't respond. And that brings us to now. I hope that this is mostly the end of it, but it seems like Pam might be desperate and do something rash. I'll keep you guys in the loop. New update. A date with Beth. Hey everyone, nothing major has happened, but I have a small update. Bob was true to his word and gave Beth my Instagram. She messaged me last week and we got to talking. The conversation went so well that we agreed on a coffee date this past weekend. Well, sorry to disappoint the naysayers here, but the date went extremely well. We talked about a lot. Our hobbies, interests, futures, jobs. I'll keep you in the loop. New update. Date with Beth. Hey everyone. Nothing major has happened, but I have a small update. Bob was true to his word and gave Beth my Instagram. She messaged me last week, and we got to talking. The conversation went so well that we agreed on a coffee date this past weekend. I know some of you are naysayers, but trust me, the date went really well. We talked about everything. Our hobbies, interests, futures, jobs, and families. Bob was right, we're a lot alike even when it comes to some of our food preferences. The date went so well that we met at a bar near her office for drinks after work, and yes, that date went amazing as well. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This weekend we're planning a hike, and we're going to stop at the winery where Bob and Pam got married and pick me up. I'm thinking of asking her to be my girlfriend. She just feels special. That's all. The date went really well, so we met at a bar near her office for drinks after work, and it went amazingly well. Now, here's the part one think you'll like. We're going to go on a hike this weekend and stop at the winery where Bob and Pam got married and pick me up. I think I'll ask her to be my girlfriend if all goes well with this date. She just feels special. That's it. I'll fill you in on how that hike date goes, but honestly, I think the situation is mostly settled now. Bob has been keeping his distance, but he hooked me up, and Pam hasn't been in contact with me for a week. After the hike, it'll probably be my last post. I don't intend to milk this thing for drama. Thanks, all. She just feels special, so that's that. I'll fill you in on how that hike date goes, but honestly, I think the situation is mostly settled now. Bob has been keeping his distance, but he hooked me up, and Pam hasn't been in contact with me for a week now. After the hike, it'll probably be my last post. I don't intend to milk this thing for drama. Thanks, all. Update 4. The final chapter. Hey all. I just wanted to say thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride and for the congrats on getting with Beth. It means a lot. Now, on to the update.as I mentioned last time. Me and Beth had met and gone on a few dates. She's truly an amazing woman. She's smart, funny, driven, and very nice. I'm absolutely smitten with this girl. LOL. We've been on a few dates and I've got to say, I'm head over heels. Last time, I mentioned the great news. I met and went on a few dates with Beth. She's an amazing woman. Smart, funny, driven, and so nice. I'm absolutely smitten with her. LOL. We went on a hike this past Saturday, and it was incredible. The weather was perfect, the foliage was stunning, and the view from the top of the mountain was breathtaking. We had a picnic at the top of the mountain, and during a lull in the conversation, I gathered my courage and asked her to be my girlfriend. I was waiting for a more opportune time, but I guess I just got swept up in the moment. In view of the mountain, she smiled, laughed, and said I was the corniest. I guess I'm the person alive who asked in the most klitsch place, but she said she loved corny and klitsch. She said yes, and we sealed it with a kiss. On the way back, we finally stopped by the winery where Bob and Pam had their wedding. Man, it really was beautiful. It had panoramic views of the mountains, and the vineyard was very pretty, but I wasn't there for the view. I was there for the apple cider donuts, though. Fun fact, we got to the winery late and almost missed the fresh donuts, but luckily we got some of the last batch. Man, those donuts were delicious. We got 2 dozen each and even got some apple-filling cider donuts. The wait was worth it. Afterward, we went back to her apartment and made dinner together. I've never had such an amazing date with a woman. It was just perfect that I didn't want to leave, but I couldn't be presumptuous when I picked up my keys too. I was late and almost missed the fresh donuts for the day, but luckily we got some of the last batches. Those donuts were absolutely delicious. We got 2 dozen each and we even got some apple-filling cider donuts. The wait was totally worth it. Afterward, we went back to her place and made dinner together. I've never had such an amazing date with a woman. It was just perfect. I didn't want to leave, but I couldn't be presumptuous when I picked up my keys. She grabbed them from me and said, and I quote, "If you seriously think you're leaving, then you're out of your effing mind." I must have had the biggest smile on my face, so we spent the rest of the weekend together. We had a wonderful Sunday brunch and a nice walk around our city, holding hands, going into stores and sightseeing. Unfortunately for me, we had to part last night because we had work in the morning. I was damn near tears. I'm sorry if this sounds dramatic, but I've been miserable at work the last few hours because I'm not with Beth. It's like when you're in high school and you get your first boyfriend/girlfriend, and you can't stand to be apart from each other, but you don't want a sappy love story, you want drama. Well, me and Beth made it Instagram official on Sunday, and apparently, Pam saw it on her sister's profile. She texted Beth on Sunday night, saying, "Bob introduced us." Pam just replied, "I knew this would happen. We figured that might cause problems later on, but we don't care. Pam can be as mad as she wants." This morning, I actually went up to Bob and thanked him for introducing me to Beth. He explained that he and Pam had a huge fight over it, but he didn't care. He said it was worth it just to get us together, and he was a big you. On Sunday night, I asked Pam if she knew how she found out, and she said Bob introduced us. I replied, "I knew this would happen. We figured it might cause problems later on, but we didn't care. Pam can be as mad as she wants." This morning, I actually went up to Bob and thanked him for introducing me to Beth. He explained that he and Pam had a huge fight over it. He said he didn't care, though, because it was worth it just to get us together. He said it was a big you to Pam, and I told him I'd buy him a round as a thank you, but he said, "Don't worry about it," and that it was the least he could do. That's the latest update. I'd like to hope that this is the end, but Pam seems pretty upset with us being together. No matter what, I'm just so happy with Beth. She's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of person, and don't worry. I'll update you if anything else comes up. Peace and love.